The first thing that shocked them wasn't a guard, not the wire, not the camp. It was the light. After years of blackout, American streets glowed at night. Windows, signs, cars. The war hadn't reached this place. They arrived expecting punishment, cold, hunger, humiliation. They expected the same harsh logic they had seen across Europe. Instead, they met procedure, forms, schedules, routine. Still prisoners, still watched, yet everything ran like a stable machine. They crossed the country by train, seats, order, meals served normally. Captivity, yes, but not the chaos they imagined. Through the windows, endless fields, long rail lines, factories, smoke. The land looked too large to exhaust. Some officers insisted it was staged, a performance built to intimidate them, a psychological defense against scale. Then came food that looked unreal to them. White bread, meat, coffee. Not luxury, just ordinary supply every day. Back home, shortage was strategy. Every bite mattered. Here, abundance looked casual, almost careless, almost effortless. The true turning point wasn't what they received. It was what Americans threw away without hesitation. Food scraped into bins, fuel burned in training. Waste didn't look like weakness. It looked like depth. To soldiers trained by rationing, that message hit hard. A war against resources like this becomes arithmetic. The camps were still camps, barbed wire, towers, rules, no illusions of freedom. But the system felt controlled. There were showers, soap, clinics, predictable meals. Stability itself became a shock after years of collapse. And there was something more dangerous than comfort. Information. Libraries, classes, newspapers, a steady drip of context. Paper doesn't vanish like rumors. It waits, it repeats, it follows you back to the bunk and stays in your head. Many prisoners worked, farms, repairs, basic wartime labor. Not as guests, because the war demanded hands. They were paid in camp scrip. Not real cash, but enough to restore something captivity removes first. Choice. At the canteen, small purchases became symbols. Chocolate, tobacco, simple goods. Proof you were still a person. Evenings changed. Chess, cards, letters, quiet talks. When the body calms down, the mind starts questioning. Outside the wire, America kept building. Roads full of trucks, rail lines moving freight, ports loading crates. They didn't need to see every factory. Enough glimpses, enough stories, and the picture assembled itself. In the barracks, talk shifted. Less ideology, more production, more logistics, more uncomfortable comparisons. They spoke about the Midwest like a separate world, fields like oceans, machines everywhere, farming scaled into industry. Convoys rolled day after day. Steel moved like a tide. The war effort looked like a supply chain, not a gamble. A name circulated again and again. Willow Run. A plant that sounded like pure myth until it sounded believable. They heard it could produce bombers at astonishing speed. The detail mattered less than the implication. Capacity without pause. That's when pride began to crack. Not from kindness, from industrial reality that didn't care about slogans. Then came exposure the Americans didn't need to shout. Films, newspapers, ordinary images of a society arguing openly. It wasn't forced indoctrination. It was contrast. You could deny it with words, but your eyes kept recording. As news of defeats arrived, arrogance faded. Not into friendship, into realism. The old story stopped protecting them. Some men wrote home less, some asked questions they never asked before. Some went quiet because silence felt safer. The camp routine continued, but the inner world shifted. When certainty collapses, every day becomes a reckoning. Near war's end, another truth broke through. Evidence of concentration camps. Not rumors, images, reports, undeniable weight. Some prisoners saw documentary footage, not as revenge, not as spectacle, as proof that demanded an internal response. You can argue with a rumor. You can't easily escape what your eyes are forced to hold. Reactions split the barracks: denial, shock, anger, collapse, and for some, a slow, painful change. After that, re-education wasn't a single program. It was repetition, papers, conversations, ordinary contact with civilians. Sometimes the strongest argument wasn't a headline. It was a small human moment that refused to fit hatred. A farmer speaking without contempt, a guard treating you like a person, a worker nodding like you still belonged. None of this erased responsibility. None of it softened war, but it changed the shape of the future in their minds. Eventually, most went home, and home was not what they left. Ruins, hunger, exhaustion, a different kind of darkness. Rebuilding wasn't cinematic. It was paperwork, bricks, meetings, compromises. Ordinary days stitched the world back together. Some returned with an unsettling memory. Dignity had existed behind wire, while dignity at home had collapsed. Democracy didn't arrive as a speech. It arrived as routines, local decisions, slow institutions, arguments that ended without violence. A continent learned painfully that connection could be stronger than conquest. Not instantly, slowly through repetition. And for some former prisoners, the shift began with a simple image: cities that never went dark. Light didn't prove goodness. It proved distance from ruin. It proved that an economy could keep breathing. Barbed wire held bodies, but contrast changed minds. That is the strange power of ordinary abundance. This isn't a story about kindness. It's a story about capacity, food, industry, logistics, and the psychology of scale. When you witness resources treated as everyday background, you start doubting every confident prediction you once believed. And the scale was real. Over 425,000 German prisoners were held in the United States during the war. They expected America to be a show. What they saw looked like a system, built to keep moving, keep producing. A system that could fight across an ocean and still look untouched at home. That contradiction was its own weapon. Then the moral truth arrived and the story stopped being simple. Some shocks create admiration, others create shame. After wars, nations are rebuilt by ordinary days. The dramatic moments fade, the routines remain. Sometimes history turns on small paper things. A newspaper you weren't supposed to read, a letter you couldn't forget. The camp fades with time. The lesson stays: what you saw, what you compared, what you couldn't unsee. People rarely change by being shouted at. They change by seeing again and again until the old story fails. War is fought in factories, fields, and mines. The battlefield is wider than the front line. So the question isn't only who wins, it's what changes inside the ones who survive the loss of certainty. What would change you fastest? Abundance you can touch, routines you can trust, or the sight of a country that never went dark?